Hey there, welcome to the Newswire on the Tyler Dickoff Show. Today, we're talking about Doge because we haven't really talked about Doge in a while. As well, there's something brewing north of the border. Producer Alex is here. Alex,
What's
do you
up?
remember the movie? This was made in the 80s. This was like, I know it's a bit old for you, but for me, it was, very old by the time I watched it. But back in the day where they only had VHS tapes when I was in college.
I remember those well.
And a buddy and I, we had an apartment for the summer. He had an internship. I had an internship. We were living in this place and we didn't have TV because we weren't paying for cable. We were only there a couple months. And so we had one of those TV VCR combo TVs. Okay.
I had one of those in my room.
There you go. You were probably like 7. All right. I was 21.
Yeah. I was, what are you, 10 years? Right around 10
something
years
like that. I think so.
I was like 11, 12.
Okay. All right. It's about the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the movies that we have that we would watch on repeat was called Strange Brew.
Yeah.
The classic Canadian.
Rick Moranis.
Oh, it's the great Dave Thomas, Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
You go back and watch it and no, that was bad, but it was funny then. Well, anyways, something's brewing north of the border. Here we had, just last week, the Canadian election. You and I both shared. This is the first time we've ever paid attention to a Canadian election.
Literally.
They had an election. They have a new prime minister. Comes from the Liberal Party, and many people in the country came unhinged.
And from what I was trying to understand how the Canadian elections are much different than US. It isn't like popular vote. It's by you vote for the council member in your area, whether they're in the Liberal Party or Conservative Party. That's literally what they're called. Yep. And then they tally up out of like how many Liberals and Conservatives won in those areas. And then if that party won the most, then that party chooses whoever's the leader of that party is the president. Yeah. It's much different.
Prime minister.
The prime minister. Yeah, much different.
It's a little different. But it's so the Liberal Party, who was in control with Justin Trudeau, stayed in control, Mike Carney, much because of the story that was perpetuated is Trump's going to take us over. Okay. That's the story. And it was kind of all about Trump. Here's what's funny. I don't know if she's the PM of, I don't know if it's prime ministers of provinces. Please forgive me in the comments. Please just inform me. Like, I want to know. But the leader in Alberta, she's like, oh, hell no. And essentially goes, all right, fine, but we're not going to do the same stuff that's happened to us the last 8 years. And I think what's really interesting, Alberta, the western province, the east side of the Rocky Mountains, a lot of agriculture, a lot of mining, and a lot of oil.
Dinosaur bones.
Edmonton, was that Eskimos? That's
dinosaur
really
bones.
Northwest There's actually a TV show that came out. I was watching it somewhere in Maui about a city it's a colony in the city in the Arctic Circle. It's kind of funny, not that funny. Anyways, and so they're like, we don't want to be a part of Canada. And so reports last week, 2 things that came out is they were in talks back when Trump got elected. It was kind of really super on the down low, but again, saying, Mr. President, how can we become the 51st state? Right.
I saw that.
They're like, we want out. And they are, signing up petitions. Well, here's the interesting thing that I have a relationship with Canada. Partly the business, our network marketing business, have a large footprint in Canada. Quebec, I've been to Quebec many times. We have many friends in Quebec. We have many friends in New Brunswick, friends throughout the different provinces, but primarily Quebec, New Brunswick, and have a few friends in Alberta. And I saw this last week, the election, and kind of all coinciding. And it was like, I saw this friend like, yeah, we don't want to be a part of this, essentially. Yeah, it was like, just imagine the most liberal oppressive in regards to, as we've seen and heard in the US, is going on there. And I think it's very comical to sit back and watch. Comical because, everything's pointed against Trump and against the US, but you have 2 legit provinces that
Yeah.
if they could leave the country of Canada today in Quebec and now Alberta, they'd be like, deuces, please take us.
Yeah, I know personally a couple friends, Canadians that moved out of Canada into the U.S. To Florida through the whole entire COVID era time, just because
I know several as well. Yeah.
the restrictions
Which is
were.
not easy. Like it's
Yeah,
funny when we talk about that immigration thing and people, kind of this idea, oh, I can live wherever I want. Like these people are like, I don't like the US, I'm moving to Europe.
yeah,
You have to have a boatload of money. You have to have no legal record at all. You can't
yeah,
have a felony and like they aren't going to let you in. Like it is
yeah.
so hard to leave the US and go to another country. And people just kind of throw it around like it's no big deal. And then in turn, like when we have regulations with immigration here, they're like, why is it so hard for people? And it's like, try going somewhere else.
I mean, the other so you have that part. The other thing is economically, the Canadian dollar is in the garbage can comparatively. I mean, I'm looking at the chart now. I have it up. It's 72 cents to the dollar, which is it's the lowest it's ever been. I'm looking at a chart going back to 2003. So that's as far back as
I
can
look
look.
at it the other way, which it's all the same. 138. So $1.38 Canadian dollar to US dollar.
Right.
It's been more of a. So back in the mid 90s, my family, we actually sold our dairy farm, sold our cows in Canada. So again, going back to this history with Canada. And I remember at that time, it was just like you could set a watch to it. It was $1.35, $1.35. We had, a few years ago, it got down to $1.10, very close on the dollar, high value. Here's what I want to bring this all back. It's really interesting when we hear the news and it's perpetuated where it's all one way or the other. And to see evidence of, again, Canadian leaders saying, no, we're not down with what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Much like when we saw 3-4 years ago, 2 years ago, probably more, where there was a lot of U.S. leaders saying, we're not down with what's going on here. It's kind of like what we've now seen. I was talking to a friend last week who splits time between here in California, Washington and California. And I made the mention, it's like, the reality is California is probably moving more conservative than Washington. He goes, oh yeah. Like it's very likely that the California is going to have more Republican representation. I think you shared with me the other day, or we both saw where the LA sheriff is now renouncing the Democrat Party and going to the Republican Party. And he three facets. He goes, I'm with the party for freedom, for faith, and family. And it's like,
wow.
it's very, again, interesting when you're constantly being told, or you go do a Google search and it leads you in one direction. You're thinking, oh, this must be the reality in the majority because this is all I see.
Yeah.
And then quickly found out, oh no.
And that's the whole purpose of your show, right? Is, you're looking at all the information and you're trying to give the audience an opinion about, hey, listen, this is who I'm talking to personally. Yeah. I know these are the headlines are reading because I'm reading them too. And it's true. Where we were searching Doge today, if you go online on Google and search for Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, news, the majority of it, you have to really dig to find anything bipartisan. It is mostly negative news articles written against Doge and what its purpose is and how it's performing and what it's doing or what it's not doing. And so, then you have to really dig into, okay, what is actually happening there? Because there is a big media slant when you do these searches, and what you're reading, and it's the same thing. Are
you saying that the classic traditional media has been biased?
Well, we all know that.
I mean,
yeah,
we know that because it's been proven in courts with like.
The cases
documentation that has been brought up. I shared with you just the other day. I was watching the Megyn Kelly Tulsi Gabbard. Now,
I was watching.
I'll say right now, I didn't really know who Megyn Kelly was because I wasn't all a part of like any of that stuff. Like wasn't a Fox News, just that wasn't my thing. And
Yeah.
over the last couple of months, I would say what really clued me into more Megyn Kelly was the whole Justin Baldoni live Blake Loop whole thing. It was like,
The
okay,
truth comes out.
the truth comes out, and so see it a little bit more here. There, it's like, okay, fine. She not really my style, but like, okay, there's value there. And see and same with kind of Tulsi Gabbard. Didn't really know who she was, like whatever, not really deep into politics. Their interview that released just a week or so ago blow your mind. Partly because of I think there's an element of when we see these sit down interviews, especially in the classic news world, we've almost been led to not believe it. One of the great difficulties that leaders are having today, and as I talk to people, they're almost, they can't fathom it, and yet it's like, stop. Like, it's reality is we live in an extremely untrustworthy world.
100%. Yeah.
We've gotten to this point where we have a very untrusting society. And it's partly because of what's happened the last 10 years. You look at, it's funny. I saw a post yesterday. It was on X, and it was of the PM Mike Carney in Canada, and it was saying all these things. Well, eventually someone says like, no, this is a deep AI fake. And it's like, okay, that's leading us to be even more untrusting.
Of what is out there, or even in people.
Well, and that's where it goes to like, if you're like, I remember a situation locally. I think we talked about this roughly a year or so ago. And there was a leader in the community who said, oh, just trust me. And it's like, you can't say that because that isn't what happens.
Right.
When we go through years now proven. And it's funny, Kash Patel, when he was being essentially approved, and one of the senators was like, you were a pretty classic conspiracy theorist. Yeah. All of those turned out to be true. Yeah. And so it's kind of like this world we live in where you can't trust things. And we're summing this up. We need to be aware.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, there's an element you can't not trust. You got to trust but verify. Right.
Yeah.
And coming back to the conversation with Tulsi Gabbard and Megyn Kelly, one of the things she was talking about, Tulsi, was that they dug up in some of their, she works in an office that oversees all of the intelligence
oversight committee,
everything, oversight, group. And they were digging through some of the organizational records. And there was a directive within this organization that if you didn't promote people based upon or give them good review based upon their DEI standing, you were in line to be dismissed.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, just sink that in. The directive was if someone is a, quote unquote, whatever DEI sector they're going after, if you're not falsely promoting them, you would be dismissed. Yeah. That's what they found. She talked about it. It's in record, right?
Yeah.
And what's so funny, I shared this with you. A buddy of mine last Friday, word for word, told me in his organization, same thing happened.
Oh yeah, I've seen it happen all the time where the employees and the company have more strength in this whole DEI fight than doing the right thing. Because of this, and we spoke about it, what we believe to be this woke movement that occurred over the last several years, in my opinion, instead of just like, let's do the right thing and promote the right people for the right reasons based on merit. But no, like it was like the opposite was happening. The opposite was, we need to hit a quota. We have to have X, Y, and Z. And if you don't, we're going to rebel. We're going to sue you. We're going, you're anti this, you're anti that. You kind of go,
like, whoa,
I'm
what'd
just
I
trying to
do?
build a successful company where all you can be a part of for many years and make tons of money, and I'll be happy and do good things. And it's like, no, we
So
got to hit this agenda.
trying to hit on some points and just rather than chat here, I think going back to the Canada thing is like, the reality is like, hey, the majority of Canadians are not necessarily, both ways. Trump is poking the bear to poke the bear. That's him. Just
Right.
understand it. It's kind of like what came out when the last week or so in the interviews where somebody was like, do you really, plan to run in 2028? And he's like, no, there's rules against it. I want to pass
Of
the
course.
baton, but you have all of these zealots that
Rubio,
are going to
yeah.
take and run with it. Why not give them something? And just sit back and laugh. It's like over the
Yeah.
weekend, the pictures of him as the Pope. And it's just like, here's my thing. And it is funny when you see it, is when people at this point
Oh, there's so many.
cannot understand the sarcasm with which he operates. And it's funny
He's
because
a New Yorker. He's a New Yorker.
And as you know that world, right? That's just normal.
Part of the DNA of being a New Yorker is sarcasm, busting chops. That's what it's like.
And so it's funny when he's coming out and saying, just take a pill, like chill out.
Yeah.
You're like, relax, people. Like,
I know.
This is what I'm going to give you something to get spun up about so you can spiral off, be crazy because you're missing the boat. Like, why are we, come on, focus on what's important.
Tyler, let me ask you a question real quick. If you take Doge for what it's worth, right? The purpose of it, right? At face value, and you remove the names Elon Musk and it's not Trump, what would we be talking about with it?
We'd be talking about 2008, 2000 or 1992. We'd be talking about several of the last Democrat presidents who came in and said, this is exactly what we need. You go back and see video of Bill Clinton saying, this is what we need to happen.
Obama as well.
Barack Obama, this is what we need to happen. Videos of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all of them saying, this is what needs to happen. Trump made it happen with someone who had the ability, technology. And that's the biggest thing is I think we completely undersell
capability
and underestimate the ability of Elon. Like you have guys that dropped out of Harvard who now are almost seeing the exact same like vile attack from people. And they're like, I'm just a computer programmer that wanted to help.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And you're trying to like come after me and ruin my life like I'm like a mass murderer.
It's nuts.
It's just, these guys that are, like big balls, which is just this funny, like online screen name. And they're destroying this kid because he's worked like 20 hours a day. Like a lot of the, the tech people. I remember Ann Hyatt had as a podcast guest. She started Amazon, worked in Google. She was working 120 hours a week and said it was just, you just did it because you were in love with what was happening. It was so amazing. And we've seen that with Doge, and they've continually unlocked. Like the other day, there was a fund that was,
the slush fund,
the slush fund, quote unquote, COVID slush fund. And people could draw money out of it. And they found this and they found out like hundreds of thousands of dollars were going to fund parties like Caesar's Palace, like rented out like unbelievable amount of money. And so they made a change and they said, well, let's just put in a requirement that you have to upload a receipt, upload an invoice in order to draw out. People stopped taking out money. And in the interview that, Elon, a few others were like, they didn't even have to upload a receipt. They could have uploaded a picture of their dog. And people stopped. And here's what's so difficult is why are this is something that I'd love to know. And please, if you're watching this in the comments and if you're upset with Elon, tell me why. I want to know why people are so upset with Elon is, this whole idea of like, he's going to steal our identity. He had access to all of it through PayPal, and people gave it willingly.
Yeah.
He has less access to that stuff within the government. It's literally
Yeah.
trying to find all of these like software gaps and putting in a solution in like quick real time. And it's just like, it's big, big money.
It's like for the first time, you're getting some really smart people that are dedicating their time and energy to a problem this country's faced over the last 20, 25 years, which is this deficit. And they're just trying to figure it out. And we all know it's a major problem. And now, everyone's got a problem with it. It's like mind boggling to me.
I think it comes back to what we've talked about is like, who's drawing the narrative and why?
Yeah.
It's kind of like this is what it is. Like, we've seen multiple reports of this. Well, the only people that can be racist are white men. Other than that, you see people reportedly like, I can't be racist. I'm not XYZ. Like, no, everyone can.
Yeah.
We go to other countries that aren't in the US that aren't predominantly white, Anglo-Saxon, as we've gone through the numbers, 75. There's just as much overt racism. You go to Asia, it happens. You go to Mexico, it happens. Like, it's not one race. It's perpetuated by, bad tradition things. And so to come back and say, well, what we're experiencing is like, it's where some of the things that I love is going back and watching some comedians, because it's like, just relax and laugh at kind of the hypocrisy that we're seeing ourselves in.
It's true. And yeah, and then there you mentioned the comedy and the meme that Trump did, and it got me thinking about the comedians that got either canceled or they just couldn't say certain things because everyone was hypersensitive over what they know is stand-up comedy. And that's like another thing that happened over the last 10 or so years that I know a lot of comedians feel that it's gone, especially out of like Hollywood and those areas. And I think I'm looking at all these headlines. I'm reading some now. It's like Musk leaves Washington with his credibility and brand in self inflicted shambles. Move fast and destroy things. 100 chaotic days with Elon. These are the most.
I mean, here's what I want to. I'm not going to be obtuse and think that they've handled some things that probably, if we're talking from a leadership perspective, that's not the way to handle things. Right. Coming into departments and laying off 10,000 people, probably not the best way to really do things. But here's the other side of that. We see that go on in other private public organizations
all the time.
And it happens. And people still buy their products. Again, I'm not trying to justify it being right. I also will say at some point, I talked to a little bit to, I think I maybe shared with, as we're getting ready for the event a little bit later this week, the Impact Driven Leader Summit, which if you aren't going to be able to make it, we will have recordings available. So just stay with us. If you can make it, come. We still got a few tickets. Go to idlsummit.com to reserve your spot. But one of the things that I've learned this from John Maxwell, he shared again, is you can either be loved or you can be a leader.
It's a good one.
You can either work to be loved. Mr. Rogers, everyone loves me. Or you can be a leader. Now, don't get me wrong in thinking that you can't be loved as a leader, but you're loved because you're willing to do the hard things and lead people through it.
It's tough. I mean, there's a lot of do we have to really think about this too hard? Not to get like religious, but I mean, you think about Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to think about like leadership and sacrifice.
Well, I mean, even let me give you a different position. Mahatma Gandhi. Very much the same, right?
Nelson Mandela.
Another prime example of people who sacrifice so much. Like, Nelson sacrificed his family, couple marriages, poor, relationship with kids that were broken here, there because of his time in prison, everything else, and just the way it was portrayed, because he understood there was a much bigger calling on his life.
Mhm.
And, in many ways, you see Elon doing the same. Whether you agree with it or not, I'm not saying you have to, but that's what he's willing to do. And he's put his mouth where, his actions where his mouth, like, dude's done the work. He's put in the sacrifice. Like, if anyone challenges him, like, he's not this talking puppet like George Soros that's trying to manipulate and undermine everything differently. It is like, I'm all in, and I will sacrifice everything that I've ever made to be all in. And he's kind of done that.
And talking about it, on podcasts with Rogan. And again, if you don't agree with Rogan, I think, in my opinion, Rogan does a good job of calling out bullshit. Like, he's corrected many people that's come on a show. It's not like you come on Rogan and just he'll agree with you on everything. You get to see the person. You get to see this is a flesh and blood human being with feelings and right and wrong, just like all of us. But everything he does is scrutinized and under a microscope. But you get to see those real interviews, and I think that's only helped. And having platforms like that can help us better understand what is going on, what's truth and what's
One of the things that we had a podcast last week, and it got into a very touching, I would say, controversial conversation we're having these days. So you and I followed up with that. We're looking for an additional guest forward, and that's been on my mind. That's a tease if you guys didn't realize. So just pay attention. We'll release it later. Of carrying on this conversation, and this is one of the things that I've seen is there's very much this protect such and such group. Protect such and such, like fringe minority. And when I say fringe, I mean very small in numbers.
Yeah.
And I come back and I was thinking about this morning. The epitome of democracy. The epitome of democracy is majority rules. Not minority, not the smallest, most oppressed. It's the majority. That's democracy. Like it or not, that is democracy. And so when we stop and think about whether it is feelings based upon what Doge is doing, whether it is we want to be a part of this country or not, or I agree with these policies or not, you can have that opinion. But true democracy says if the majority of people want X, Y, and Z, then that's what they will have.
Right.
And it's everything but democracy if you push that out. Now, I know there's many people that are very up in arms about, democratically what Trump has done, this or that. Well, it's part of in some of the regulations. You look back and, the things that he's done based upon if he were, and this is just a, if the main 3 points that we talked about, Trump getting elected was gender equality, gender rights, right? That was a big one. You had the economy, number 2. And you had immigration. Those were the 3 big things. Remember, the 3 big things that everyone, and he said, I'm going to address those. He made a national policy identifying this is a male, this is a female. That's all we're going to see. Right, wrong, or different. That's what he decided because the majority of people who voted for him, that's what they said they wanted. So that's what he did. Number 2 is when it came to the economy. He has gone all in on trying to do something to change the economy. You can't say anything that he hasn't done something to try to effectively change. You may not agree with the tariffs. You may not understand the tariffs. You may believe everyone that we are all boiling down and dying because the stock market is off its highs, which is settled in.
And Trump's hilarious, and he'll say something like, before the market's rallying. This is before he got in office because I'm coming into office, and it did, which is, and you really got to read in these headlines. The markets react to news both positively and negatively. They think in the future ahead of time.
Day trading possible.
Yeah, and so definitely his election, like you saw, there was a total correlation and run up, and then things cut up, and maybe tariffs can be detrimental, right? We have to see how those play out. But he'll say
he's
that
done something. And here's part of the thing that I know in business and life and in leadership is you can either do the complete opposite. Had we said, hey, we want gender rights, again, the voters, and he went and said, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, that's not adhering to democracy. Number two, if, the economy, hey, I'm just going to keep it as it is. That doesn't really go. The third one, immigration, if he said, nope, borders open, come in all you want. Again, that's not doing what the majority that voted for him. Yeah. And so when we see all of this pushback and say, well, we're standing up for democracy, it's like, but are you? Do you understand the rule of democracy? Now, I know you can get into opinions of like, that's not it, but just go back to the granular first subject of democracy. It's majority rules. And I think what is difficult is we see so much of the small groups, whether it be a gender, whether it be an immigration, whether it be economy, that are saying, but what about me? You're not in the majority, so you don't have a voice. And I know you don't like that, but that is democracy. And it isn't always split on political
it's not always
lines,
fair.
In gender and or race. It is the collective. And that's democracy.
Yeah, and it can be bad, it can be negative, it can be positive, and not that I'm drawing what is right or wrong, but like you're right. It's with I know I don't want to get into it on this one, but
really?
The conversation you had about on gender, it's a tough one, and because I want to save it, I think we should probably save it.
I mean, here's the point that I would say to that, and I think it's fair in our world today where we're saying, hey, we need to protect certain groups, very, I would say small in numbers groups, and they've acknowledged small in numbers groups. Do you protect the small in number group at the disdain of the majority who's saying we feel like we're being oppressed? That's what's difficult when we come back to where we've largely seen this directive, whether it's go to Canada. Oh, Canada, hates the U.S. Oh, really? Because there's two provinces that kind of say they want to be a part of the U.S. One of them one of them within a couple of years ago, and you still go ask them, and they're like, yeah, I'd much rather be a part of the U.S. Like, that's not me saying that. That is people that live there, and or by recent documentation of flying to Washington, D.C. and say, hey, how do you annex us? Like, let's go through this. Like, can we make this happen? And, coming back to, again, the Doge thing of what news you actually get or not get. And, then there's the whole, well, they're making it up. It's like, you're telling me after you've been verified through multiple court hearings and payments for
tons of
improper
programs.
journalism, built millions of dollars of penalties, payments, that now all of a sudden I need to believe you when you're saying, oh, they're fabricating lies. And I have a hard time, like, really, like, my head's spinning. Just
it's tough. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, man. It's like you have finally somebody trying to do something about a problem that's been going on, like we said, for 20 plus years, and you have the media, most media, just all they want and can do is just bash it and how horrible these people are and all this negative. And it's you kind of have to ignore it. I'm not and that's why I do a lot of research, and I'm just like, I can't, these headlines.
Here's one of the funny things, and this has been documented. You can search it. During the Obama presidency, 8 years as he was president, he averaged 55,000 deportations a month.
Right.
That's about 2,000 a day. Trump, I think through the Trump administration, whether you agree with the deportations or not, and some of them are heart wrenching, that you're kind of like, I don't understand why. And this comes back to a conversation Tulsi Gabbard and Megyn Kelly had. It's like, yeah, but there's people that seem like they shouldn't be deported, and they're, like, oh, they're a good dad, this or that. Like, I was reading an article the other day about someone here in Spokane who was picked up and deported, and his wife is upset. And it's like, he's a multiple, eventually through the end of the story, he's a multiple time felon.
Yeah.
Okay, when you go through and say we're going to go through and people that have had legal issues or we've identified, those are who get deported. I go back to, if you want to go to other countries and you have a felony, they won't let you in. So it's not a unfair system. But coming back to it, it's like, I think through the first 100 and a couple days, Trump is averaging, the administration's like 1,000 deportations a day.
Yeah,
part of that is they don't have the staff they once had to do all this because it's been pared down over the last 10, 12 years. But it's also kind of like, just context.
Let me ask you this. How do you feel after the first 100 days on Doge and Trump and, what you're hearing in your own community? Like, are things changing, or are they the same, or like, where are you at?
Depends who you listen to and what you read. You go and actually talk to people and are like, yeah, it's okay, whatever. Like, no big deal. And then, yeah, you do hear the heart-wrenching stories of the guy who got home from work and there's agents there that pick him up, throw him in a car, drive him off, and, there's no contact. Yeah, there are those stories for sure. But it's also, it's naive to think this.
Yeah.
As much as we hear those stories, it's naive to think there aren't people that are, if they were to tell them, I'm going to go pick you up, that go into hiding and flee, and then all of a sudden the chase is on. It's naive to think, it was told to me the other day, and I agree, it's naive to think that people aren't changing gender for competitive advantage. It's naive to think that adults are not grooming and manipulating children for, a lot of things. It's naive to think, to come back to one of our conversations, it's naive to think that there is not foreign agents on our soil collecting intelligence. It's naive to think everything you're told. And I think that's in a day and age where, again, it's trust but verify. And we have a generation of young workers and young individuals, Gen Z, my kids included, who they're going to say bullshit.
I remember growing up as a young kid, like getting in trouble, my dad yelling at me or saying something. He would always say, if I can't teach you, life will teach you. And he's like, life people can be really, really not great.
Yeah. And I think that's where, when some of the arguments are, oh no, they're good. No, there are bad people. Yeah. Now, is it a huge number? No, but there are. And I think that's where, some of the directives in, oh, we need to cater to this group or that group. It's like, if we cater to everyone and protect everyone, then we're protecting that group. And so it's kind of like, is one more than the other? And yes, there is a civil right responsibility. The Bill of Rights lay that out. And even though the Bill of Rights were violated for 200 years, they were. Let's be honest, they were.
Yeah.
Yet it got corrected, and in time, do we see it? Yeah, I don't know. And I think there's a big difference between, whether it's Doge, accepting that and honoring that, whether it is, finding the reality of not everyone is bought into an ideology of, I'm just going to put a liberal, extreme left wing, as Bill Maher has identified, even within the party, is like, yeah, no, that's crazy stuff.
Yeah, there's splintering within the Democratic Party.
And I think the as it was having a common sense approach, which is very easy for people to say, it's very difficult because people don't have a common sense approach. What's common sense to you may not be to me, and what's common sense to me may not be to you. And hundreds and thousands of other people. And
Millions.
how do you enter, that discussion that's kind of democratic. It's like, well, how many people believe this is common sense compared to people that don't? And all right, we're going to go with the majority.
Majority, yeah.
And, it's not always possible to have a consensus, but then understanding if we're going to stand up for democracy in one way, then we have to stand up in ways that we don't necessarily like either.
Yeah. And everyone, the last thing I'll bring up is like everyone talks about, when the United States is going to fall, like similar to like the Roman Empire. And I'm just like, they're so different. Rome was built.
Wasn't built in a day.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither was the United States. But like they had a dictatorship. There was a Caesar, right? And
emperor.
There was an emperor. Well, they were called Caesar. Julius, whatever,
Augustus,
the emperor, the whatever ones.
Yeah.
And you had the people, right? And then you had the Senate.
Yeah, Senate.
Right? And so until the people, which was the masses, were like, we can't, live in this type of society anymore, and basically overthrew everything.
But what was the downfall? The downfall was the internal corruption.
Yes, the internal corruption, which led into the people going, this is bullshit.
Yes. Which honestly, if we look at what I think Doge is uncovering, it's that same type of corruption. So I would say if in this conversation we're talking about what led to the downfall of the Roman Empire, I mean, they lost a lot of their values, right? That's what really struggled through a big part of that, later term Renaissance, everything else. They lost what were values. Okay. Kind of relate to what are our current values in this country. We're really stricken on that because it's hard. And there was a lot of internal corruption on the side of leadership. And it's like,
totally.
Yeah. You can understand why it is. And I think that's why even more someone like Elon or coming in and saying, oh, hey, we need to pull back the curtains here.
Right. No. I 100%. And that's where it's like the majority have spoken. The minority, are
have a voice. They can be heard. And I think that's the bigger thing that people misunderstand. It's like, oh, if we're going to go in the line of the majority, but that doesn't mean that the minority doesn't have a voice. That voice is imperative to be heard and to be understood, because one of the things that I'm reading, I heard this from podcast guest Brian Kite. And Brian was like, I'm just in the search of truth. It's like, okay, great. And I'm reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations right now. It's part of my morning read. And one of the things that Marcus was adamant about was seeking the truth. And he goes, here's the thing. We all have opinions. And they started one day and they'll end another.
Yeah.
And the only way they start and the only way they end is by seeking the truth.
That's the end of this episode.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe and bell in order to get notified whenever we drop new content. If you're watching on Facebook, man, drop a comment. Would love to have a conversation with you. And the same with LinkedIn. Man, I enjoy this platform not only because Alex and I get to share and interact, but also to hear from you guys what you are living, breathing, and seeing as well. Enter the discussion. Put something in the comments. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.